So the Black Widow movie just came out, and in case you couldn't read the title, I think it's pretty clear that I am not a big fan of this movie, like at all. Don't get me wrong, there are a few positives coming out of the Black Widow movie, namely the 3 other main characters, a part of Natasha's little family, and believe me, there are a few other positives that I'll get to in a little bit, but for most of the movie, I was kind of just sitting there waiting for something exciting and interesting, and it just never came, sadly. So before we get into anything else, first off, I wanted to say, hello, my name is DJ, and this is my spoiler review of the Black Widow movie. So if you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend you go and check it out before coming back onto this video and liking this video, even if you disagree with my opinions. And since I kind of followed this format for the Zack Snyder Justice League review that I did a few months back, I figured I'll follow it again. So we're going to be kicking off this video with all the things that I like, and then we're going to get into the stuff that I didn't like, which is a lot. But right out of the gate, I just want to say, for the positives, 1, Yelena is the best character in this movie. If there's anything good you can say about this movie in particular that could potentially affect the MCU as a whole in an interesting way, I would say Yelena specifically seems like an interesting character. Sure, you have Alexei, aka Hopper from Stranger Things, who is a fairly interesting character to say the least. The mother is somewhat interesting. I can't really see her doing too much in the grand scheme of things, but she's somewhat interesting nonetheless. But Yelena specifically knocked it out of the park. Absolutely the greatest part of this movie. However, if Yelena is ready to take over the role of the secret agent of the Avengers, then by all means, please, fire ahead. I'm in on that. But yeah, in terms of other positives from this movie, I guess there are interesting singular scenes in the thing. Like the opening scene in particular was kinda interesting, I guess. I mean, it was pretty generic up until Natasha, well, the young Natasha was protecting her sister. I thought that scene was really cool. I liked the scene where Natasha met Taskmaster on the bridge. I thought that was cool, and it was an interesting way to showcase Taskmaster's power or her ability throughout the movie, just to watch her mimic Black Widow. Although she didn't really do it too much more later. It was more like she was copying the Avengers more than actually copying her rivals. But hey, you know what? She was copying Black Widow, doing cool stuff, and I was pretty into it. But without a shadow of a doubt, the best scene in the entire movie is clearly the scene at the dinner table where Natasha and the sister, Yolanda, are just pissed off at the mom and the dad, and there's the pig, and just showcasing the power of the mom, you know, controlling the pig, and Yolanda's just watching this, knowing that that's exactly what happened with her. I don't know, I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. But other than that, yeah, that's kind of it when it comes to the positives, which kind of sucks, because a part of me really wanted to like this movie. And like I said, there are individual things about it. Okay, the 3 other family members especially were very interesting, but yeah, everything else kinda, I just did not hit right, and I did not like it. First off, the Taskmaster twist. So, for people who seem to really hate this movie, they hate the treatment of Taskmaster, because Taskmaster isn't a dude. No. That is not why Taskmaster sucks. Okay, so Taskmaster, like I said, individually, when she was introduced into the movie, that was sick. Okay, showcasing the power of being able to mimic their opponent, that was pretty cool. But then you get to the twist as to who Taskmaster is, and the entire movie, maybe I was kind of building this up in my head too much. Okay, maybe I was doing some fantasy writing in my head, and it kind of ruined the twist for me. But I really did not like that Taskmaster was the daughter of the main villain. Like, it was underwhelming, to say the least. I guess in my head, I kind of was really hoping for it to be the real mother of Black Widow. But And I know that's definitely my fantasy brain, but hear me out. Think of it like this. The whole movie's about family, right? Why wouldn't there be that conflict between Black Widow and her real biological mom, or, you know, the fake family that she only had for 3 years, and then she has to kind of go and choose one of those two families. I don't know. I thought that was an interesting twist that could have happened, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just expecting too much. But I don't know. It just in my head thematically made way more sense to have that as opposed to having it just be the daughter, because of course it's always the daughter, right? It's always the person you think is dead. That was sort of my logic with the mom thing, but the mom just, I guess, fit too well thematically. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But don't get me wrong, I do like Taskmaster. I thought Taskmaster was really cool, but it wasn't a very satisfying twist to the story. And yes, you heard me. I am not against the idea of Taskmaster being a woman because it's different from the comics. I don't care, okay? The Mandarin twist is actually kind of good in Iron Man 3, and I know a lot of people don't like that twist. I'm one of the guys who does, okay? If you want to change a comic book movie thing to fit the overall structure of the story you're trying to tell, fine, go for it, as long as it makes the story better. But what else needs to be said is the fact that the fight scenes are bad again. Awesome. And again, I know that this is something that's probably gonna only annoy me, but the fight scenes started to really get on my nerves after a while. I really hate, this is a thing that I thought Marvel grew out of, by the way. This whole idea of having these fight scenes where it just cuts between the camera every second. Like, I understand the idea that you have to hide the stunt actress or the stunt actor in these movies, okay? You have to hide them so that, you know, the fight can look real and stuff, but oh my god, after a while, you just don't know what's happening. You can't tell what's happening when the two characters are fighting, and you can't tell what's happening in the fight because the camera keeps changing every second. It just looks so sloppy every time, and it bugs the hell out of me. And like I said, I thought they grew out of this. This is something they were doing back in, 2016, which, by the way, we can turn that into a transition for a second, because let's talk about the year 2016 for a second, and the MCU as a whole. And I know that was a bit of a forced transition, but it kind of needs to be said. So this movie takes place in 2016, right after the events of Civil War. First off, I don't think anybody was asking for that story, nor was really expecting that story. Perhaps more people thought that this was going to be more of an origin story for Black Widow. I don't know. Anyways, it takes place after Civil War. But the problem is that this movie feels like a 2016 Marvel movie. And, okay, so this is going to be kind of a bit of a difficult thing to explain, but please let me go with this. From Guardians of the Galaxy 2 onwards, every single movie in the MCU, outside of a few notable exceptions, has had a certain flow to it. Okay, the MCU past Guardians 2 sorta created its own way of showcasing its own maturity, and I don't mean that in its tone nor its language. Every movie kinda just felt important, and every single sequence seemingly had some sort of consequence while feeling even more fun than those movies before 2016. Compare Captain America the Winter Soldier to Thor Ragnarok, and you can tell that there are huge differences in its sort of presentation, if you would. Okay, sure, I will admit Thor Ragnarok is very colorful and it's a bit of a standout for the MCU, but if you think about it, like everything past Guardians 2, including Guardians 2, seemingly feels a bit like a standout for the MCU, while all feeling like it's in this one fun universe. Spider-Man Homecoming, Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame movies all of those movies have its own interesting MCU style. Sure, comparatively, they are all similar to each other in terms of like their presentation and stuff like that, but compare those 5 movies to like any 5 movies before Captain America Civil War, and you can see that they have completely changed how they make their movies, whereas Black Widow in particular feels like one of those older movies. It feels like one of those movies that hasn't evolved or changed, almost like it was written and made back in 2016. And I'm not necessarily saying that that in particular is a bad thing, okay? Obviously, there were some good movies back then before Captain America Civil War, okay? You had Iron Man, you had the Avengers movie, but the problem is that the MCU has sort of moved past that kind of style and presentation, okay? It just kind of feels like a 2016 movie, and considering it came out in 2021, even though it was meant to come out in 2020, I mean, it's already so out of place, and now it feels even more out of place. But those are more directorial and editing sort of complaints. Let's kind of turn it back to the story, because the story of this movie takes place in 2016, like I said. However, the problem is, and you can probably guess by now what I'm gonna say, is that none of the movie has any stakes to it, because Black Widow is dead. She sacrificed herself for the stone, and she's dead. So why would I believe that she's gonna die anytime before that? A part of me kind of wished that she did die then, and they had some really cool and interesting explanation as to how she came back to life later on. Or hell, maybe it's a memory and she's like trapped in the Soul Stone or something. I don't know. Again, this is me fantasy writing the hell out of that and just basically coming up with things out of my ass, but I don't know. It just... there was no stakes to any fight, okay? Black Widow would have all these little fight scenes. She would be in every single fight scene, and there's no stakes to it. And I understand that you can probably say that about most Marvel movies, okay? Obviously, Spider-Man is not going to be dying in Spider-Man Homecoming. Iron Man's not going to die in his first movie. But the thing is that Black Widow has already died. We've seen it. We've seen her die way later in the timeline. So it just makes everything feel less interesting. Not only that, but we haven't seen any of these other characters since then. Okay, I would have loved to see a Taskmaster cameo of some kind in another movie. I would have loved to see the other family members show up in Endgame and in Infinity War. That would have been pretty cool, but no, they didn't show up, and it's just weird, man. It's just weird. And sadly, perhaps the biggest thing about this movie that kind of sucks is that this movie probably would have been good if it wasn't in the MCU. If it wasn't in the MCU specifically, well then, that probably could have been an interesting spy movie, okay? Change out Black Widow for another character, change out all the other spies into different kinds of spies. Hell, you can even have a super buff, strong guy. And, I mean, you have a pretty interesting spy movie. Just don't use Marvel characters. But yeah, I guess that's it. I could say more negative stuff about this movie. Hell, I even have more bulleted points written down in my notes, but I think you get the point. Black Widow, as a character, is not that interesting. This movie did not make me even more interested in her. The only things that I liked about this movie were the side characters, and I would love to see Taskmaster. I would love to see her sister, her brother, her mother, all of them people in the MCU more often. I would love to see them in the future, but for me, it wasn't that fun. Other than those characters in particular, I wasn't a big fan of it. It was like a 2016 Marvel movie, and not a good one. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. A 4 out of 10. The asshole in me wanted to say 3 out of 10, but for you viewers, and you know I'm a bit of a cynical piece of shit, sometimes I understand that too. I agree that I was a little harsh on some of the Justice League Zack Snyder stuff. I'm not apologizing, but I agree I was a little harsh. So I'm not going to be harsh to this. 4 out of 10. I'm never going to watch it again. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this review of the Black Widow movie. What did you guys think? If you've seen it, let me know down in the comments section below. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And of course, have a good day. Bye-bye.